Hello everybody. Okay, we're going to go through and do a quick review of chapter 10 of the logic. We're going to review the key points of chapter 10 and then we're going to go over a couple of highlights of the quiz. So let's begin with this. All mammals breathe oxygen. A horse is a mammal, therefore a horse breathes oxygen. What are the key things they wanted you to learn in this chapter? First of all, they wanted you to understand that you have, in a syllogism, you have two premises and you have a conclusion. So this first one we call premise 1. Whoa, that's kind of hard to read, isn't it? That's better. This first one is premise 1. The second one is premise 2. And this is the conclusion. Now what else do we need to know here? They wanted you to learn about the terms. Most of you were pretty good. You had the terms figured out. I'm going to do this in color. The major term is the one that is the predicate of your conclusion. So this is our major term, which we put for P because it's the predicate. And we also see the major term up here. Our minor term is the subject of your conclusion, which we're going to call S for subject. And we see that it's in premise 2 here. And that leaves us with the middle term, which in this case is mammal, which we see is also here. So that's the middle term. So we have three terms: major, minor, and middle. Now, what about the premises? I called this premise 1 and premise 2. But the premise that has the major term is going to be the, that has the major term is going to be the major premise. So that's the major premise. And the one that has the minor term is going to be the minor premise. And that's as simple as it gets. So this whole thing, all three of these together, again, these two, premise 1 and premise 2, these two together are called the antecedent, and this one is called the conclusion. So the essential law of argumentation is that if your antecedent is true, then your consequent must also be true. Okay, we're also going to talk about something called the principle of reciprocal identity, and we're going to look at this particular syllogism here. All men are mortals, Socrates is a man, therefore Socrates is mortal. So let's look at this for a second off to the side. If I were to label each of these, I'm just going to do it this way. I'm going to put a label above here, call that A, call this B, call this C, and then man again, of course, would be A. I'm just going to do that because it makes it easier to write. Now let's look at it off to the side. So in this first sentence, I'm saying men are mortals. Men are the same as mortals. Right? Mathematically, that's the same as saying A equals B. Let's look at the second premise. I'm saying Socrates is the same as a man, or using my letters, mathematically speaking, I'm saying C equals A. Well, let's look at this from a math perspective. You know, if A equals B and C equals A, then you know that you can conclude from that that C equals B. So likewise over here, I can do the same thing. If men is the same as mortals and men is also the same as Socrates, then I know I can conclude from that that Socrates is the same as mortal. And that's the conclusion that was made here on the syllogism. So that's called the principle of reciprocal identity. If I have a term that is equal, this term is equal to a third term, this term is equal to a third term, therefore the two terms must be equal to each other. Principle of reciprocal identity. Now likewise, I could look at the principle of reciprocal non-identity. So let's look at this one. no men are angels. Socrates is a man, therefore Socrates is not an angel. In the first premise, I am basically saying that men are not the same as angels. And the second premise, I'm saying Socrates equals a man. So if I were to put this in math terms, let's just substitute letters in here again. Again, I'm going to make that A, B, C, and again this one would be A. So in math terms, what do I see over here? Men, I'm calling A, angels B, Socrates C, man A again. So this one, mathematically speaking, is A does not equal B. This one, C equals A. So again, if you saw this in algebra, if you said A does not equal B while C does equal A, then you know you can conclude from that that C does not equal B. It's the same here. Let's just come back to our words. If men do not equal angels and Socrates is a man, then I know that I can conclude from that that Socrates is not the same as an angel. And that is exactly what the conclusion is of the syllogism. So this is called the principle of reciprocal non-identity. I have one term that's not equal to a third, a second term that is equal to that third, therefore I know that the two terms do not equal each other. There's non-identity. Alright, so let's look at one of the syllogisms on the quiz. Okay, let's talk about this one. I have two premises and I have a conclusion. Let's start in the quiz. This is the fourth syllogism in the quiz. So in the quiz, the first thing they asked you was to identify the major and the minor premises. Then they want you to find the major term, the minor term, and the middle term. Let's flip to other colors. So remember, the major term is the one we call P for predicate because it is the predicate of your conclusion. So this is my P, which is my major term. And where else do I see it? I see it also right here. Minor term is the subject of your conclusion, which in this case is War of Roses, capital S for minor term. And I also see that it's up here. What's left is the middle term. I don't have another color, so I'll just circle it. So it leaves me with wars and wars. So those are the two middle terms, which they designate with a capital M. Okay. So I have identified my major term, my minor term, and my middle term. Now they want you to identify the major premise and the minor premise. The major premise is the premise that contains the major term. So that would be this one. This would be the major premise. Now they're asking for the major premise, so that means you have to write the whole premise out. Some of you were just giving the major term. So what would the minor premise be? The minor premise would be this one. I should probably put PR. This is the minor premise because it has the minor term. Again, they're asking for the premise, so you would put the whole word. So that's basically how you would break down those two. That's all I'm going to do on this quiz. The rest of the stuff on the quiz, they're asking you for definitions and terms, things that you can look up in the book very easily. So I'm not going to give that to you. You can go back and look that up in the book. And we're going to go review quiz 11.